Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter.
Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and today's video will be talking about Paul O'Grady. Now, of course, as you might expect, I wasn't planning on talking about Paul O'Grady, but it's recently been announced that he has passed away at the age of just 67. I woke up to this news, as I think a lot of us did, and it's taken a lot of people by surprise. It's certainly taken the entertainment world by surprise, the TV world by surprise. So this video is just to talk a little bit about Paul, about his life, his career, the achievements he had, and also to pay tribute. So this is the article that I saw from the BBC just announcing his passing. He died unexpectedly but peacefully on Tuesday evening, which was confirmed by his husband, Andre Portasio. He rose to fame in the 90s with his drag queen persona Lily Savage, going on to present the BBC One game show Blankety Blank and other light entertainment programmes, and then went on to host a number of chat shows. And I think for me personally, as a viewer, that's where I first became aware of Paul, the Paul O'Grady show, namely during its Channel 4 run. I think that's where I first became aware of him, and then as time's gone on, I've occasionally caught him on the radio, seen him in different interviews and stuff like that. I'll talk more about my experiences with Paul a bit later on, but for now let's just continue with this article. His husband said, "It is with great sadness that I inform you that Paul has passed away unexpectedly but peacefully yesterday evening. He will be greatly missed by his loved ones, family, friends, animals, and all those who enjoyed his humour, wit, and compassion. I know that he would want me to thank you for all the love you have shown him over the years." And the tributes have been pouring in from various recognisable people, such as the Queen Consort, Camilla. Of course, she did a programme with Paul about the Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, which I think, Paul was an ambassador of for such a long time, and obviously he was very big into animal preservation or care, etc. There's been more tributes as well, honestly, tons and tons of tributes. For example, you've had tributes from Lorraine Kelly from over on ITV, Amanda Holden, Simon Mayo, Aled Jones, Vernon Kay, Elton John. I think Danny Beard put in a good statement, who won the 4th series of RuPaul's Drag Race UK, telling the BBC that O'Grady was the most important person in British culture for drag. And again, a lot of you maybe who are younger might not know about how Paul got into the mainstream with his drag act Lily Savage, and we'll touch more on that in just a little bit later. Carol Vorderman also made a comment saying he just fizzed. He was one of those people that just made you feel every part of you was alive. He exploded through the daft, made-up rules of society, a massive talent, but you can't forget he was a social worker when he was younger. He saved babies and young children from abuse. He lived in Soho before it was gentrified. He never judged the vulnerable, the weak, the misunderstood. And I think that always carried across whenever I saw or heard Paul, in one of his chat shows or something like that. He always came across as like the people's person. There was sort of no, ironically, despite Lily Savage being a drag act, with Paul himself, there never seemed to be like this front he was putting on, this character. He just genuinely seemed like a really nice, really chilled out, really fun guy. And it's such a shame because he was recently going to be on tour, or I don't know if he was or was going to be on tour playing Miss Hannigan in the musical Annie, and he was actually going to be in the Liverpool Empire in June, which is a theatre I used to work at many years ago. So, being an actor myself and then seeing another fellow actor being cut off in their prime is just such a shame, because again, he's only 67 on his passing, and these days 67 isn't really, I'd argue a lot of people wouldn't class that old at all. And again, I think it's the shock of how quick this has happened, because again, it was unexpected. There's a bit here about his longtime radio producer, Malcolm Prince, said that he visited the star at his home on Tuesday afternoon, yesterday, the time I'm recording this, describing him as laughing, smiling, and full of life. He was very proud of Annie, so happy to be back on Boom Radio after leaving Radio 2, looking forward to so many new projects, and now he's gone. I can't believe it. We have lost a unique talent, and I've lost a dear friend. And in fact, on Radio 2, where Paul was for 13 years, Zoe Ball on her breakfast show paid tribute, saying, "We're all heavy of heart here this morning at the news of our dear friend Paul O'Grady. I know he was loved by the Radio 2 listeners and all of us here." So again, I imagine more tributes are going to come in as the day progresses, and rightfully so. Just a bit about Paul and his life then. It says he was born in Birkenhead on the Wirral in 1955 to a mother whose maiden name was Savage, which is believed to have inspired the famous drag act. He began performing as Lily Savage in the 1970s. The drag queen later performed in a solo show that ran for 8 years at London's Royal Vauxhall Tavern and made a name by speaking out about LGBT issues. He later hosted a chat show, The Lily Savage Show, for BBC for a short run in 1997, before turning his hand to hosting a revived version of the game show Blankety Blank, which remained on air until 2002. And I believe he hosted that as Lily Savage. And I've never really watched Blankety Blank much, but I imagine, he would have made it a very entertaining, very energetic show nonetheless. It seems he has been confronted with health problems before. During 2013, when his chat show, I imagine, was fronted by guest hosts after he suffered a health scare. He'd previously had heart attacks in 2002 and 2006, the latter of which requiring a stay in intensive care. So no stranger to health problems, but again, at this present time, it wasn't said it was a heart attack, it was just an unexpected passing, but I'm sure in the weeks to come, more details will be revealed. In terms of his actual life, he was made an MBE in 2008. He had a daughter with his friend Diane Jansen in 1974, but later married a Portuguese lesbian in 1977 in a marriage of convenience and only legally divorced her in 2005. You've got to remember, gay marriage in this country, actual marriage, was only legalized in, when was it? Was it 2013, 14, around that time? So just around 10 years. Before then, I think civil partnerships, a sort of side term for marriage for people of the same sex, I think that was that 2005 that came in. So you've got to think, in the 70s, when Paul was, a young man in his 20s, gay marriage wasn't a legal thing. Homosexuality had only been decriminalized, I think it was 1967, and there was still a lot, there still is, sadly, a lot of, bad will from some people towards members of the LGBT community. But you got to think, back then it was even worse, like tantamount to, horrible things. But so a marriage of convenience, a lot of gay men did undergo, where they'd marry a woman, again, for the sake of convenience, whether that was for, confronting documents or anything like that, But he did get to marry his husband at a ceremony in London in 2017. So, that's really heartwarming to hear that even though it was later in life, he did manage to marry the man he loved, which I think is very poignant and also very, very touching and very emotional at this time of his passing. And again, I'm sure as you look, there'll be tributes from all kinds of people, all kinds of broadcasters, other members of the LGBT community, other drag acts. There's just so many kind words, because I've never heard a bad word about him. Now, as a broadcaster, you might not maybe like his style, but I've always sort of appreciated his very open and honest style here. I just want to touch on a story here saying how Paul O'Grady stood up to police who raided a gay club in 1987. And you got to remember, at this time, this was like the height of what they said was the AIDS epidemic, when AIDS was really taking hold and not a lot of people knew what it was. There was a lot of fear, a lot of misinformation. It says the operation was ostensibly prompted by concerns over the use of amyl nitrate, otherwise known as poppers, but was widely believed to be part of a wider movement to close gay clubs during the panic over AIDS. More than 20 officers flooded into the venue wearing rubber gloves, prompting O'Grady to joke, "Well, it looks like we've got help with the washing up." And again, I think that is a very typical Paul O'Grady, or in this case, I guess, Lily Savage response. And I imagine that got a big laugh despite the fear, and maybe helped dispel a lot of the fear, because police raiding a club, that's a terrifying thing. But I think it takes a personality like Paul's to really help people try and feel as calm as possible or more at ease as possible. It says in total 11 arrests were made, with some reports saying O'Grady was among them taken into custody. According to the National Archives, the raid prompted significant backlash from politicians and the local community. And O'Grady himself recalled in an Instagram post 2 years ago, "They made many arrests, but we were a stoic lot and it was business as usual the next night." I was in quite a few police raids all over the country at the time. I was beginning to think it was me. In fact, the South London Press, in an extremely homophobic article, called Lily a lascivious act, which I was very proud of. Just takes everything in his stride, doesn't he? But yeah, I just thought that was a really poignant story about him. And again, Lily Savage, for those who don't know, I think that was one of the first drag queens to really become like a mainstream name amongst the UK public, at least. I'm not sure if Lily was necessarily the first, but definitely I'd say one of the most iconic. And Lily wasn't born of any misogyny or any sexism or anything like that. Speaking in 2008, Paul said, "I've frequently been asked over the years who Lily Savage was based on, and I've always answered that it was no one in particular, and she was just a figment of my imagination. The truth, I realise now, is that Lily owes a lot to the women I encountered in my childhood. Characteristics and attitudes were observed and absorbed, Auntie Chris's in particular, and they provided the roots and compost for the Lily that would germinate and grow later on." So it was born, in a way, out of either love or appreciation or acknowledgement of those around him, and it formed this character that went on to entertain millions. Again, an 8-year residency at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern from 1984 to 1992, gathering that mainstream success during the 1990s, having your own show on the BBC by 97, having a blankety blank revival for several years, and he starred in sitcoms and had his own chat show. Again, the Paul O'Grady Show is where I first encountered him, and that ran for various different iterations from 2004 to 2011. And then recently, in the last decade of his life, he did big into animal shows. 2012 saw the launch of the series Paul O'Grady for the Love of Dogs, which was covering the Battersea Dogs and Cats home, which we touched on. He's a massive animal lover. He had his own farm with several animals, and he was really big into looking after animals, making sure they got the respect they deserve. And I think these documentaries actually, contributed to a positive uptick in people either, reaching out to dog and cats homes or taking better care of animals. So he really did make an impact there. And on the radio, as I said, he was on Radio 2 for 13 years, from 2009 to 2022. It's a shame it did sort of end in acrimonious circumstances. He was eventually sharing his slot with comedian Rob Beckett, which he didn't really take to. I don't think that was any ill will towards Rob Beckett. I just don't think, he appreciated that. And eventually he left Radio 2 in 2022 and was going to be on Boom Radio. So a really long career. I mean, even if you just look at some of the stuff on Wikipedia here, there's a ton of stuff you might recognize, some stuff maybe you don't recognize, but he was definitely a constant force. And I just want to round off by, again, sort of touching on my experience. I've already sort of touched on that. I saw him occasionally on the Paul O'Grady Show or other chat shows. I listened to him on the radio, but I did very briefly get to meet Paul sometime a few years ago. Now, I didn't necessarily work with him. It was within an acting capacity, but we didn't work together. It was when I was at Big Finish recording my Doctor Who adventure. He happened to be there on the same day. He was in recording an episode of The Avengers, which, for anyone who doesn't know, it's not Marvel's Avengers. Back in the 60s, there was this really popular TV show called The Avengers. And Big Finish, like they do with Doctor Who, have been making either new adventures or, in this case, adapting existing adventures for the audio medium. And he was in there, and it turns out he was a pretty big Avengers fan, which I don't know how many people necessarily knew, but he was a big fan, and the chance to come in and voice a character was a pretty big deal to him. And, when we were all having lunch in the green room, he just sort of regaled everyone with various stories. He was chatting about the animals on his farm. At the time, chatting about, the stuff going on with BBC Radio, because that was all happening at the same time. So whilst I never got to work with him as an actor, being in the same presence as him, having to, getting to chat with him even just for a little bit, I even got the sense then he was this really warm, down-to-earth guy, really funny, really witty, just seemingly really happy with what they were doing, really happy with life, just happy to be around other people, a great storyteller. So yeah, that's my little personal anecdote being around Paul O'Grady. And again, his adventure, somewhat ironically but also sadly, did get released this month in March 2023. So it's The Avengers, the comic strip adaptations, Volume 7, Steed and Tara King, which is out now. You can get that from the Big Finish website. And in it, Paul himself plays a character called Septimus Crump. So that is, that's a great name in itself. So yeah, if you want to check that out, it's available on download or on CD from the Big Finish website there. But as I say, I just wanted to make this video to acknowledge the passing of a legend, not just in entertainment, but, again, for the LGBT community. I wanted to touch on some of his amazing work, some anecdotes, some tributes from other people. I wanted to pay my personal respects, how I first, was aware of him, and again, my brief meeting with him a couple of years ago. He just seemed like an all-round good person, and I think the entertainment industry is going to shine a little less brighter now that he is no longer with us. But thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave in the comments down below. Let me know your memories of Paul O'Grady. You know, did you watch him on the telly? Are you old enough to remember when he did Lily Savage quite a lot? You know, let me know your memories and your thoughts in the comments down below. In the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.